Hi everyone, my name is Brianna Swartzfager, and today I'm going to provide a summary of my findings of the Educator profile. For the Educator profile, I chose to observe and discuss the theoretical connections of the teaching of Miss Kayla Pyoff, who is currently a teacher at Colonial High School. To begin, I'd like to provide a little bit of a background on Kayla Pyoff. So as mentioned, Kayla is currently a teacher at Colonial High School in Orlando, Florida. She has been there for 6 years, and this is her 6 out of 12 years as an agriculture educator. We discussed multiple aspects of her teaching career, including her teaching style, which she says is more an inquiry-based instruction. Her philosophical view of learning is the understanding of the interrelation of broad concepts in development of wonder, as opposed to just the traditional route of memorization of fact. She uses a variety of instruction to teach all sort of learning modules, including discussion, reading, demonstration, hands-on lab, and then real-life application. Her style is influenced by her view of agriculture as both a scientist and a professional industry person. She does try to blend both those through the classroom methods that just were discussed. As we discussed through her strengths and weaknesses, she came to the fact that student engagement is really a big strength of hers, which I would have to agree. She uses a lot of enthusiasm and multiple methods during her instruction to engage her students throughout the whole lesson. She likes to invite questioning and encourage student participation so that they're more self-motivated towards their own learning. As we discussed her weaknesses, she says that her biggest weakness is probably with formal assessment, and she doesn't monitor student progress as closely as she would like. She believes that students are just so over-tested, and there's so much weight that's placed on testing that she chooses not to really use the formal assessment in her classroom, which she does recognize that kind of creates room for error that she's not really aware of to correct. This year, she did say that she struggles to ensure engagement due to the online learners and the face-to-face. For our Orange County module, they do what's called Launch Ed, which that is the student online platform. And then we also have the face-to-face learners as well. So they're being simultaneously taught during each class period, which definitely poses a struggle to student engagement. In addition, we discussed more how she accommodates learners with different needs. Of course, the obvious answer would be through IEPs and 5.0 forms, and participation in, of course, accommodation meetings. They do generally help to assess the why behind that student variance. But the different needs can really have a multitude of meaning, she suggests. So what she does in terms of accommodating learners is really personal relationships, and that, of course, goes back to that student engagement as well. But she really tries to get those personal relationships with her students, so it allows her to learn who they are and really what motivates them, why they like and why they don't like school, and helping them to be individually be successful. Next, I'd like to discuss the observations made from the two different but relating lessons from Kayla Pyoff. During these two lessons, which was her animal science class, the first lesson was really introducing what artificial insemination is and how it's used in the industry. The second lesson kind of tied to that and expanded on the students' knowledge and had them more critically think about artificial insemination from a producer standpoint, and they did some online research. For both of these lessons, she did ask open-ended questions at the beginning of the lesson that kind of related to artificial insemination, in which she did provide ample time for both her face-to-face students and her virtual students to respond to that question. During that second lesson, Kayla did ask questions related to the livestock semen sites that were provided to the students, and she would ask probing questions such as why should someone purchase a particular semen. Also during that second lesson, she actually had me give kind of a financial standpoint from a producer perspective to the students so that they could get some real life application of this topic. Throughout both those animal science class periods, she called the majority of students by name. She asked them questions directly as she greeted them at the beginning of class. She did allow a lot of sharing of stories between her and the students and among each other. She had really great communication during both lessons and really high student engagement. Like I said before, with this whole integration of the Launch Ed or the online learning platform for Orange County, it has made some challenges for student engagement, but Kayla did an awesome job with those students. She called on every Launch Ed student who didn't respond to the poll at the beginning of class so that she could collect input and try to push for student participation for classroom discussion. Throughout the class periods, both the face-to-face and the Launch Ed students were asked questions related to the lessons. And again, she allowed students to kind of communicate with one another even within the first 5 minutes of class. At the beginning of the class as well, and during her, the method that she used, a PowerPoint method, at the beginning she explained through the objectives very thoroughly during that first 10 minutes of class for each of the lessons. For example, the main objective for her second lesson was for students to understand the more economic impact of breeding techniques like artificial insemination. She used a variety of learning activities to try to meet those learning objectives. Like I said, she provided a visual aid, that PowerPoint. I know that she has used Google Slides, along with the lecture for more auditory learners. She asked multiple questions throughout the lesson to try to engage those learners. And during that second lesson, students were given an activity that included, like I said, doing online research from the Cattle Vision site and one of the pig semen sites as well. And they were given an activity that they had to answer 3 questions from those sites regarding the purchasing from elite bulls or boars. During the lesson, PIOP did adjust the activity due to a student question that was posed regarding the term of club calf that was on the Cattle Vision site. And she did explain thoroughly that club calf was not a specific breed of cattle, as one of the students did question. In addition, like I said, for the online learners, having those online learners as well as having the face-to-face learners, it can be a little bit difficult to have some movement around the room. Kayla did do a great job still with that challenge of moving as much as she could around the classroom, but as well as allowing the online learners to feel comfortable as well in her classroom environment. And as I mentioned before, she uses a lot of real-life examples, not just from her own life, but as well as like student lives, to try to incorporate and connect into her lessons so that it is more like real-life observations from her students. In terms of the like off-task learners, like I said, again, with the online learners, that can be hard with the student engagement part. So there may have been some few online learners that were off task as they didn't necessarily answer the poll at the beginning of class or when she posed a question, even after being called on by names. Lastly, I'd like to discuss the theoretical connections within Kayla's animal science lessons. She used a lot of different techniques, and one of those that I really noticed was the motivational techniques that she used, which goes back to the whole student engagement. She used different techniques to encourage intrinsic motivation with her students. She used a lot of verbal praise when students were on task and they were answering those questions correctly. She used that voice inflection to also try to encourage that intrinsic motivation. By the end of the lessons, her students really I could tell that they felt confident and they felt proud of the task that they had accomplished, that they understood what was being portrayed to them. In addition, she also used some behaviorism, especially the primary prevention strategies, to try to teach productive behaviors. By praising her students when they had accomplished a task correctly, she was kind of using that operant conditioning by providing more positive reinforcement for appropriate behavior. And then when students, especially those ones online, were using just some harmless, inappropriate behavior, she would ignore that behavior in order, again, to try to support positive behavior modification. In addition, she also did self-regulated learning, which is really a big strength of hers. She used those self-regulated learning theories to try to provide her students an environment where they are thinking more critically and monitoring their own progress. During both her lessons, she provided clear objectives to her students and learning goals. Students would self-monitor throughout the lesson through the use of online polls for those online learners, and then also verbal monitoring for the face-to-face students. By doing this, the students were able to meet those learning goals and objectives that were presented at the beginning of class by the end of class. Lastly, Kayla did use constructivism theories as well in her classroom by inquiry teaching as kind of a form of discovery learning. She led classroom discussion that were pertaining to the topic in class, which was artificial insemination. She would ask questions that would require students to use reasoning, such as, why would a producer choose one type of semen for artificial insemination versus another, or even why are registered animals named the way that they are. By posing these questions, the students were really able to apply this knowledge to new situations.